The beauty of video games is that even in the strictest linear titles, there's always a way for players to adopt a role and live out a power fantasy that they never could in real life through gameplay choices. Of course, when it comes to dialogue options especially, lying is often a viable choice, adding an element of bluffing to the experience that brings with it its own risks and rewards. In RPGs especially, being able to lie your way to the end of quests or out of combat provides a tangible sense of accomplishment for fooling both friends and foes, encouraging you to adopt a role and manipulate your surroundings. Sometimes developers go one step further though, and hide secrets or key gameplay elements behind checks that you have to lie to get through. You might not feel good about it, but these rewards are probably worth sacrificing your honest integrity for. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game secrets you had to lie to unlock. Number 8. The bonus mission. Splinter Cell Double Agent. Splinter Cell Double Agent is all about lying. It's right there in the title, as player character Sam Fisher is forced to go undercover and infiltrate the JBA, a terrorist organization, while at the same time maintaining an alliance with the NSA. The sequel actually does a pretty good job mining the uneasy alliance between the two factions for pretty solid drama, and both the player and Sam can struggle to figure out whose side they're actually on. There's a system included as well where you have to keep the trust meters of both the NSA and the JBA high, which is a tough task considering doing a job for one side often compromises your position with the other. To keep both sides happy, you need to be an expert undercover cop, blending truth with lies and finding a way to complete conflicting missions without arousing suspicion. The game rewards you for playing smartly with a bonus mission, which triggers after saving 2 out of 3 of the game's major targets and keeping the NSA's trust meter above 33%. Getting here involves framing other people and deferring blame for sabotaging the JBA's terrorist plots. Doing so successfully will give you the best ending, as well as an extra mission on a boat that has you defusing the bombs on board. Number 7. The success rate of diplomatic immunity. The Elder Scrolls Skyrim. The Elder Scrolls is always at its best when it throws you into a ridiculous infiltration scenario, forces you to adopt a role, and fool the absolute idiots who live in this fantasy world. Skyrim has one of these, and while it's not the most elaborate or intricate in the whole franchise, it has some pretty funny variations depending on how well you can bluff your way through the mission. During the diplomatic immunity quest, players are tasked with infiltrating the Thalmor embassy to figure out whether or not they're linked to the re-emergence of dragons. Of course, the Thalmor aren't just going to let any old scoundrel in, so you sneak in during a party, disguising yourself in their robes in order to move around unnoticed. However, this isn't a game where all it takes is a new set of threads to fool everyone around you, and a choice you made right at the beginning of the game can give you away entirely. Depending on your race, you're either going to be easier to spot or harder, as the Thalmor themselves are all elves, and there's a good chance, well, that you won't be. Being any of the elven races in the game will successfully disguise you, as will being any of the humans, but if you've chosen to be an Argonian or a Khajiit, you'll be spotted immediately. I mean, it's kind of hard to hide a great big tail under Thalmor robes, and your attempts at lying will fall completely flat. On the inverse though, playing as an Ultima will blend you in so well, you'll actually be able to boss people around by pretending you're an authority figure there. Number 6. Beat the game in 10 minutes. Fallout 2. For the most part, the Fallout series, especially the earlier isometric games, is the poster child for player choice. Every installment, bar maybe Tactics, embraces player freedom, to the point where a lot of the content is actually optional. The second game takes that to a ridiculous point though, giving players the option to actually finish the story in just over 10 minutes if luck is in their favour. It's a bit of a convoluted tactic admittedly, requiring you to get a few bombs, some psycho, upgrade your speech, pretend to be dumb to pass some dialogue checks, and pretty much run from every enemy encounter. But it all hinges on you being able to bluff your way into the Enclave HQ and bomb it all to hell. This requires you to attain some power armor in order to walk around the base without arousing suspicion, which can be stolen from a building in San Francisco. After arriving at the Enclave, you have to blend into your surroundings, assassinate a few key figures, shut down a reactor, and convince Sergeant Granite to join your cause and take on the game's final boss, Frank Horrigan. Once he's dead, you can walk out the compound to victory, having connived your way to saving the world. Number 5. Pretending to be RAIKOV. Metal Gear Solid 3. Metal Gear Solid 3, on the surface anyway, doesn't really appear to be any deeper than your average stealth action game. You sneak into bases, hold up enemies, mess around with the AI, and move on to the next gorgeously directed cutscene. However, for those looking to experiment, there is a crazy amount of things players can manipulate in order to create unique, often hilarious outcomes. This mentality extends to the infiltration missions, where instead of sticking to the shadows and slipping past enemies, you're forced to don a disguise and blend in. One of these disguises is Major RAIKOV's uniform and face, a man who bears a striking resemblance to Raiden from Metal Gear Solid 2. Messing around while impersonating RAIKOV results in a bunch of funny Easter eggs and secrets, especially if you encounter the real RAIKOV while you're wearing his face. Here, the Major will look longingly at you before letting you know how beautiful you are, and if you linger too long, he'll even, grab your crotch. That's probably the strangest addition, but you can also have fun calling paramedic on the codec to surprise her, salute the scientists who will become absolutely petrified, and even whip out the mask while fighting Volgan to give you a brief attack window. Number 4. Skipping the pointless NPC dialogue. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest is one of the most infamous games of all time. The strange sequel is an absolute nightmare to play, with its puzzles being completely random and obtuse to the point where most players will simply get lost and have no idea how to progress. That's not necessarily the fault of the game designers though, but rather the English language translation, which turned dialogue into total gibberish. There are RPG elements to be found, like the ability to talk to merchants and townsfolk, and these aren't simply there to add character to the world, but to help you out when it comes to completing missions. Civilians are programmed to give you clues to help solve the riddles and puzzles hidden within the game, but whatever information they were supposed to convey was absolutely butchered in the translation, to the point where talking to them does more harm than good. Consequently, when you get to any of the points where you're supposed to talk to NPCs and decipher the clues, you'll hit a roadblock that only a walkthrough or a guide can solve. Now, walkthroughs aren't exactly lying per se, but you essentially have to trick Simon's Quest into working for you and to think you've actually spoken to and understood the NPCs. Either way, it's honestly not worth the hassle. Number 3. WHODUNIT, The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. As mentioned earlier, The Elder Scrolls is always amazing when it traps you in a scenario where you have to play a role and use your wits and silver tongue to get through to the other side, rather than magic or dwarven hammers. Perhaps the pinnacle of this design, or at least the most memorable example of its execution, is the WHODUNIT quest from Oblivion. Part of the Dark Brotherhood questline, you are tasked with crashing a party being held at a manor and covertly killing everyone inside. While you can of course just brute force your way through everyone, the game gives you plenty of options to take people out in style and even play the guests off against each other. As you start offing people, the others will start to realize there's a murderer at the party, and you can use this suspicion to finger other people and divert attention away from you. Essentially, you can manipulate the whole situation, and if you're as smart and conniving as you think you are, let everyone else do your dirty work. Number 2, tell Patches you're a cleric to make him hostile. Dark Souls. The side quests, and hell, even a chunk of the main quests in the Dark Souls series, rely on being as vague as possible in order to get the player thinking about the consequences of their actions, rather than simply taking everything at face value and mindlessly following a waypoint. Patches is a recurring character who shows up throughout the series and its spin-offs, and all of his side quests involve manipulation in one form or another, and players are forced to assess how much they trust him and what his true motives are. For instance, in the first game, you can be forced into a mini boss fight with him and void your quest entirely should you lie and tell him you're a cleric. In fairness, he absolutely deserves smiting as soon as you lay eyes on him, and it will stop him from dropping you into a bunch of traps later, but it also serves to punish you for fibbing. Inversely, if you are a cleric, you have to lie and say you aren't in order to unlock his questline. What's particularly humorous is that by the third game, with the player fully aware of how he's acted in the past, lying to him here and trying to protect your companions will actually get you in more trouble. Here, he actually does want to help, but you might find yourself not trusting him and getting Grey Rat of the Undead killed in the process. In a way, the game lies to you here by pretending Patches is the same old villain he's always been. Number 1, unlocking YUFFIE, Final Fantasy VII. While you can technically unlock YUFFIE as part of your party as soon as you step foot in the first forest after traveling to the Mithril Mines, you can just as easily miss her completely by choosing the wrong dialogue responses. First though, you have to beat her in combat, and when you do, she'll throw a temper tantrum and try to steal an item and flee. To stop her doing this and instead get her in your party, you need to choose the right answers in response to everything she says following the fight. This is admittedly easier said than done though, as it partly means you have to lie and partly means you have to look your way through a 50-50 gambit. Initially, she'll ask if you're interested in a rematch, which you have to decline. Then she'll say you're pretty scared of her, which is obviously why you're not up for battling her again, to which you have to lie and placate her by saying you're petrified. Eventually, you'll talk her out of her hysteria and demands for yet another fight and convince her to join your cause. Get any of the 5 responses wrong though, and you'll completely mess up your chance of expanding Final Fantasy VII's roster. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are there any instances of lying to gain a secret in video games that I missed off here? And while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.